wasn't on. Good morning, everyone. My name is Harrison Russell. We have a very special guest joining us today. She is a social sexuality educator and comic storyteller who gives students perspective and information so that they can better navigate cultural, media, and peer pressures, particularly around their social lives and sexual relationships.
This event today is being co-sponsored by Hannah's House, a local nonprofit therapy center founded in 2010 to honor the memory of a former Harwood student, Hannah Bedford. Hannah's House supports emotional health for individuals and families by providing local, accessible counseling and educational programs.
We've created some follow-up questions for TAs to use tomorrow. We would really like to encourage all the TAs to try to have a discussion with their students. And with that said, I'd like to invite everyone to take a seat. There's plenty of chairs, so no one has to stand around on the sides or in the back of the auditorium. And please join me and join us in welcoming to the stage Cindy Pierce.
Okay, so I am, as he said, a comic storyteller, sexuality educator. I travel around speaking to college students. I speak to high school students occasionally this morning, middle school students. Sometimes I speak to middle school students, not quite about all the things I talk to you guys about. I am also a mom. I've got a senior in high school, a boy, sophomore girl, and an 8th grade boy. If you get a little uncomfortable with some of the things I'm talking about, just be grateful that I'm not your mom, because I'm a social liability for those 3 kids. They're just like, having a mom like me, they're like, no, please don't say that word when our friends are over. I'm like, it's gonna happen. So, they know a little more than they'd like to know, I'll tell you that. So, my message today for you is, my aim is to give you information and perspective about sexuality and social life, your friends, all those things, information and perspective to help you, find your way in both high school and college. So basically, and part of you was like, who is this lady? She could be my mom talking to me about sex. Like, what can she teach me? Like, who's that old lady? And some people say, well, I've written 3 books about sex. I'm writing the 3rd one right now for college students. I've written one for middle-aged people. I wrote one for parents and educators of kids. So after, writing 3 books is the interesting thing about me personally, writing 3 books about sex and being someone who's so comfortable talking about sex, someone who's so comfortable in my body and who I am, is the funny thing is I was the last person to have it. Like, the last. Okay, like, end of college is when, because I was careful about my choices. I was like, you know what, plenty of opportunity to have sex, but I'm not going to have average sex. I wanted to be with someone awesome. I wanted to be with someone I have a connection with, respect, and like, I want that. So I'm going to wait for that. And plenty of opportunities. People telling you they had that. I had a good sniffer. I'm like, no, I can smell what's not going on, or what is going on. I got it. So I was the last person to, that's what's so funny, and people say, oh, well, maybe she's so comfortable because when she was in high school, she was like this young, hot Scooby snack who dissolved into this middle-aged situation. No, you guys, I've been rocking this look my whole life, okay? Like, a few more gray hairs, like, big bone, big muscles, layer of frosting, like athlete, I ski raced and played soccer in college. So I've been looking this way all along. I've got lots of ideas on how to have a makeover that maybe would help. Like, I thought, like, when I get to college, I'm going to have myself a boyfriend, then I'll be ready for sex. And I was in there, and like, boys were like, oh, you're kind of the friend. You're like the little sister, the big sister, yikes. And some girls were like, okay, so I think if you got a perm, 80s. And they're like, if you got a perm and maybe some more like girly clothes, like you might have a boyfriend. I'm like, not worth it. Like, if that's the problem, not gonna do that. Like, oh, maybe you did some makeup. Like, some makeup? No thanks. Like, don't have time. So it was like, you know what? If my repellents are keeping fellas away from me, that's fine. On I go. So trust in the repellents. They're very handy. If they keep you from having a relationship, because it is a clear signal, like, this will be good. And 5 years later, you'll be like, awesome, so glad I didn't do that. Boom. But you don't know that now because you're just blinded by like, I need that. You don't. If it doesn't happen, you don't need that. And that's hard to accept, but try to do that. So another thing that got me super comfortable, like I think being an athlete helped me be comfortable in my body, but still the last person to get involved, like carefully going along. But being the youngest of 7 children, I got to watch my 6 older brothers and sisters, 3 brothers, make a lot of decisions, a lot of choices, and then I got to see the consequences of those choices. And that basically helped me find my way through. I mean, basically they cleared a 7-lane highway for me to like make my way through life. And also, by the time I was 8, my 2 oldest brothers had been married and divorced. Ooh. So I was like, at 8 years old, wow, relationships are no kidding. And I was the kid who was allowed at the table to come talk about all the relationship stuff. They let me right in there. So I was in there having the conversations, hearing about what was going on in the relationship. So with one brother, I had some rotating sisters-in-law. So between all these grown-ups in my life, they taught me a ton because they'd sit around the living room talking about sex, talking about bras, boobs, periods, everything. I was the kid. I was like 2'7". So I was a kid who was 2'7" and undeveloped goober, kid at school who knew everything, taught everyone about everything. And like this little thing, like I seriously was a goober. I didn't develop till well into high school. Like I was like the kid. I also played sports with boys. So I was a ski racer. Soccer was the only time I was with just girls. Tennis playing, ski racing, and baseball. So I didn't want to play softball. So everyone moved over to softball. I played baseball. And with all the boys. And while I had a crush on some of those guys, they were not interested in me because of the repellents, you know. So, but when they're not interested in you, they tell you everything. So I knew way too much about boys' personal habits, very personal habits, at a very young age. And you know, baseball practice, there's so much downtime in baseball that you can chat. So I had like dual citizenship. I was bringing the info from the girls over to the boys. I was bringing the info from the boys over to the girls. And that was really handy. And I was learning a lot, and they were learning a lot. So I was that person. Now I'm 50 years old. I still have dual citizenship. Men still ask me questions like, Cindy, we can ask Cindy. She'll tell us everything. You know, and it's just my role in life. That's who I am. So I think it was really great, though, to be able to have these older brothers and sisters to run things by, or people on my team, like this whole collection of people where I got information. And so I think that when I talk about that, that's my healthy crew. And healthy crew, by that I mean who are the adults you have in your life you can go to for guidance, people you can go for advice. We're lucky if we have one of our parents. You're really lucky if both your parents are those people. My parents could not teach me about sex ed. They were my dad spoke nothing, no genital words. He was just like, no, you do not speak of it. It was like, okay, all right. I remember he was always telling us, be careful, daughters. There might be a guy who opens up his trench coat and shows you this was his word for the penis. And I was like, okay, I knew, like he couldn't say the word and put his hand as far away from the actual thing. I mean, it was weird. He couldn't speak of it. My mother, she also didn't really want to talk about sex, but she knew she was the one that was going to be relied on. So she would not say anything, but if I was really desperate, I went with a question, and then she would just blow torture me, like, and it was so much information, like you wouldn't come back for months. And it's kind of a conscious move on her part, like I'll just lay it down and she'll be scared to ask. And that was effective. Now, fortunately, had the boys on my baseball team and had the brothers and sisters who shared everything else. And I think that's really important. You've got to find those anchoring adults who you can ask questions. I'm 50. I still have, now that you're 50, like my healthy crew of anchoring adults, some of them are much younger than I have role models who are 22 years old who teach me a whole lot of things on college campuses. And those are people on my crew, my healthy crew. Now, also when I'm talking about your healthy crew, think about, we all have this group of friends, and they're all our good buddies. But who are the 1 or 2 people in your life with whom you can share anything, you can be your full self, you can say anything and not be judged? Who is that friend who has your back? Who is that friend who gives you honest feedback, like, you shouldn't have posted that picture, you shouldn't have said that, you know? Who's the friend who also can call you out? And here's another piece, people. Who's the friend with whom you can cry? Now, guys, I know by the time you're 6 or 7, you're taught no more crying is allowed in public. I taught first grade. I remember the little boys, like all of a sudden something would make them sad, and they're trying to hold it back. breathing, and their eyelids are cupping the tears, they're like brimming, they're tilting their head, trying not to cry, and they're just 6 or 7 years old, they're wee little lads, and they're trying to hold back because our culture says, no more crying. And then like even their friend who's super supportive is like, dude, I'm stepping away, you're on your own. And he's just left out there, and then finally, the tears come down. Woo! And everyone remembers that poor kid, you know, remember when Josh cried and Jim in the corner? Everyone remembers it. Our culture's so brutal. As women and girls, we can cry, we can be strong, we got the full spectrum. Think about how hard it is for a guy who cannot be his full. That takes energy to tuck that away. So fellas, when I ask you, do you have a friend in your pocket, like a friend you know, if you needed to have yourself a big boo-hoo, do you have that guy? Think about who that guy is. Nice, I'd like to hear a yes, yes. You want that guy, you got it. And if you have 2 friends you can cry with, Shazam, you're really in. Okay. So another factor of growing up the youngest of these kids is the only way to rebel in my family was to not drink, because all my brothers and sisters said, Cindy, when you're a teenager, you're going to drink and do drugs, because that's what teenagers do. I was like, oh, you watch me, people. And I'm like, storming through, like, I was a little judgy in middle school of anyone who was experimenting. I'm like, you're weak, you're a conformist, you don't, like, you can't speak and be yourself. I was super judgy, so I was like, And then I had this friend when I was in 9th grade. She was in 10th grade. She had already stopped drinking and doing drugs because she had been heavily into it in middle school. And by the time she's in 10th grade, she's sober already, like, kind of young to find that sober place. But she had been to the bottom of the barrel and came on back up. Now she said to me, you can hang with people who drink, like come to this party. I'm like, no, I don't like that scene. She taught me to like get in the party suit, be my sober self with conviction. And when you are your sober self with conviction, at first people are a little bit like, you gotta have a beer, what's wrong with you? Judge on that side. After a while, they're like, okay, that's your gig. Like when you, anything you do with conviction, whether it's dancing, not drinking, like when you do that with conviction and you stick with it, people are like, okay, that's your thing. So I had to, as I got to college, I was at parties all the time in college as a non-drinker, had a blast dancing up a storm, people assuming I was drunk by the way I danced. I'm like, no, I was actually sober, thanks. Yeah, sorry. And they're like, ooh, sorry, a little sad for you, the way you dance. Yeah, I was right there, fully sober. So, and it's like one of my favorite things about myself is being like someone who's not on that train, because it helped, like I have social courage. Now it started young, where I got some social courage, but it just grows. The more you have it, the more comfy you get. Like there's just not many situations I've ever been like uncomfortable. Like embarrassing moments, even as the embarrassing moment, I do have embarrassing moments, but I'm already laughing at myself while it's happening. Like, this is so bad. Like, oh, this is going to be a good story for my friends. Like, that's how I roll. And so social courage, though, takes practice. I had a lot of practice. And so many people rely on alcohol. Like, that's the place they go for. It's interesting, like, at parties, I notice, I'm an innkeeper, and we don't have a liquor license, so people bring their liquor in, even grown-ups, because they practiced, you know, drinking to be socially comfortable. It becomes your kind of lifelong practice. So I notice when people come to our inn and the beer or the wine has not shown up, you see the people, they're like, so awkward. As a non-drinker, I'm like, get these people a drink. They're so awkward. I'm like, what is wrong with them? And then the drink comes, and it's amazing. One drink in your hand, and people, their body language changes. They have this confidence of a drink in their hand. And amazing how they're like, they get this swagger, like, I can say what I want, I can do what I want, and I've got this drink because I'm drinking, and I can do what I want. It doesn't matter if it's their first or their 12th drink. They're like acting like, I'm now comfy, and this is... Interesting how that is. And as a person going to a party, if I went to a fraternity where I didn't know the guy who was at the door, and I'd come in the door and he'd say, he's the keg boy, like handing out the beers. Here we go, gotta get everyone a beer. And I'd walk in and he'd be like, do you want a beer? No thanks. You gotta have a beer. No thanks. You gotta have a beer. And I'd say, actually I don't drink. And then he'd say, oh, so do you want to hold this beer so you feel more comfortable at the party? I'm like, no. I said, do you want me to hold this beer so you're more comfortable at the party? And then he's like, ooh, hiding behind his little keg, like he's kind of scared of me. It's like, wow. Now you think that people would grow out of that. 50 years old, still fully functional adults say to me at parties, oh, they offer me a drink. No, I'm all set. Do you want, well, how about if I clean this beer bottle out and we can fill it with seltzer? I'm like, I'll have a seltzer, actually. I'm sorry you need me to have something that looks like a beer. Like, it's amazing how people assume they just want everyone on board. So observe that in your life as you go along, that social comfort around alcohol. So a big part of what I'm going to talk about is following your inner compass. Your inner compass is going to help you make decisions. It's going to, you're going to know what's the right decision for you. Now, I don't assume that everyone should start, people say, what's the right time to have a sexual relationship? Everyone knows that for themselves. Some people have really healthy relationships with a person they're communicating with, they're comfortable with, and they can, that's like their best friend. That's awesome. So everyone has their own time, but hooking up, just random hookup with some random person just to get it over with, that's not a healthy relationship. That's not how it should be going. And we've normalized that. We've said, this is how we do it because we're so busy. What are you so busy doing? Like, cultivating your social media profile? I mean, like, really? Like, checking out your friends' pictures on Instagram? Like, you're so busy? You got plenty of time to work on connecting with someone. Like, relationships are about connecting. So connection, also, alcohol is a way to disconnect in order to connect. So think about that. Hooking up is about disconnecting from yourself in order to connect, but that's a disconnected connection. I'm talking about, it's scary and it's vulnerable. It takes social courage to put yourself out there emotionally. So I want you to think about how that goes and what you observe and what you have in your own life going on. But following that inner compass to know what decisions you're going to make around sex and alcohol, that requires you really knowing yourself and listening to that inner compass. But so many things get in the way. First of all, we all have a void. As teenagers, every teenager has a void inside of them. And as you get older, hopefully you figure that out and that void gets smaller. Some people trying to fill the void in a panic and do it but with social media or just hooking up or sex, drugs, eating, not eating, exercising. People are like, there's such an emptiness. Your void compared to the void of people in the past is much larger than our void was. Your void is much bigger because you're exposed to so many more things. The internet, as awesome as it is and how it does bring us information and great things, it also makes it so you can see this wide range of things you could be, should be, would be, if you had, if you could, if you had this money, if you had that connection, if. So there's this constant breeding of envy. And that social media, as great as it is, it also breeds envy. Because when you're a kid, like you know that people spend all this time cultivating their profile and putting these perfect pictures out there and everything's so fabulous, and people put this like whole fake idea about how their life is, right? And you know, sometimes though, even though you know that, when you're in your sweatpants and you haven't showered and you sit in front of your computer or your phone looking at pictures, you start to say, my life is so boring here in Vermont. Like, look at all these fabulous things people are doing. And no one posts the reality that every kid, every place I go across this country, every kid thinks they're like the kid in the middle of the nowhere with a boring life and everyone else is living. Because people just post what's fabulous. They don't post the normal everyday. I'd like to see that unshowered picture posted. No one would have the courage to do that. But that's the reality for most kids. So it does breed this envy. And then we get to texting. Texting is something that you don't, once again, it's a disconnected way. It doesn't take as much courage to send a text because you're like clickety-click, and you head out, you don't know how it lands, you don't know how the person felt when they saw that text. And it's really important to think about the things you're sending. Could you say them? Look through them, and could you have said those things face to face? And how is it that we rely on this distant device to say something that we don't have the courage to say? You need to be practicing saying it face to face. And when people say it would be awkward to say it, you need help with awkward. You need to get in awkward soup, live in it a little bit, and that gets you to the other side of awkward. You need practice being in the awkward situation, okay? And the thing is, reading cues, these interpersonal skills or reading social social cues, such as facial expressions, voice tone, what people are saying with their eyes, body language. All of those things are saying things, but if we're constantly communicating here and we're not interacting with people, we're not very good at listening, we're not very grounded and connected, we're not paying attention, we need more practice reading those cues. So as great as texting is and keeps you 30 miles wide, 1 inch deep, you do need to connect more face-to-face. So while we're talking about texting, let's talk a little bit about sexting. So it's interesting that everyone's like, it's no big deal, everyone does it, no one gets caught, so and we'll say to the adults, we'll say, do you know if you're caught, you could be put on a sex offender list? True. Do you know you might not get a job? Do you know that a college might not look at you? Do you know that people look through these things and hear about these things? And people are like, it never happens, so I'm going to keep doing it. And that's the thing about, I just want to talk about, so for guys sending nude pictures or partially nude pictures, there's this idea, sometimes it's because you're dared to do it, or you get social credibility from your buddies, or you're kind of optimistic, like, I think if she sees my dick, she's going to be pretty impressed and want to, I think this is going to work out for me. That's some twisted optimism I just want to put out there. And by the way, I think some guys think, like, that'd be kind of cool if someone had a file of all these pictures and mine was in it. There are no files. No one's really interested in files of your penis. I just want to be clear on that, just so you know. I know boys are keeping pictures of girls, but that is not happening. Now that is, when you're distributing that stuff, that's pornography. That's distributing pornography when you send those pictures around. So people are like, don't worry, I won't get caught. I got this thing on my phone. I just hide it behind all this. Ultimately, here's what I want you to know for guys. See, this is the thing. I know guys. I knew the guys who were nervous about their gear, who were anxious, feeling very nervous. Those were the guys who were making jokes about their penis, who were making all those. Those were the guys. The guys who were sending that picture, that's not a guy who's totally confident, who feels enough in the world. Observe that. Now, usually that by the time you get to be a junior or senior, you got that figured out. But just kind of take note, who are the people who are sending those around? That's not coming from a confident place. That's coming from a place of feeling inadequate. And there's a lot of reasons. Now for girls, that can also be the case, but 40% of girls who send nude pictures are coerced into it, who are convinced by guys to send it. Sometimes asked to compete with porn, like, do you want me to look at you or porn? And that puts a girl in a position like, oh, I guess I better send my picture. And then the guy says, well, I'm not going to share it with anybody. This is just between you and me. We all know that is not true. Don't ever believe that if you were a female. It's just not true. Not only will it be shared, stashed, it will then sometimes be distributed or sold, okay? Like, that's the deal. So, and, I think that people say, like, well, I can do with my body what I want. I'm an empowered woman. I can do what I want. That's a false sense of empowerment, that you're using your body as currency, that's your place of power, and that's your identity. That's what you're putting out there. So think about that. Think about what you really want to put forth. And if you really listen to yourself, like, if that's required to be with that guy, that's a red flag. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Move that fella right along. Like, you can do better. Hard to resist, but think about it. So another thing about following your inner compass is it's really hard to get comfortable not knowing. Our culture basically tells you you're all smart enough, and by this age you should be able to figure out and you should know these things. But the reality is you can't know these things. I was the youngest of 7 kids. I was constantly faced with someone smarter, someone more athletic, someone more artistic, someone who knew stuff. So I constantly ask questions. People say, how do you know so much about sex? Because I'm willing to admit what I don't know. That's how I got to a healthy place and a comfort with my body and a comfort with sex. Now, that I'm willing to admit what I don't know. Sex is complicated. And you don't need, people think like, I just need more practice. I'll just keep practicing. Those people end up with some really below average sex in their lives because what you practice becomes your practice. It's socially, you need practice. Sexually, fewer partners, partner with whom you can communicate with, someone you chose carefully. Like really, like that connection, communication, and respect, when you share those things with someone, that's where healthy, good sex can happen. But just dipping around and jumping in and hooking up, You think that's like a way to get things figured out? I've interviewed many college people, many college students, and particularly the men who are like the guy everyone goes to because he gets laid all the time, and everyone's like, we just ask him because he knows everything. The first time I interviewed that guy, I was blown away by how little he knew about sex, about his partners, about female pleasure, like he knew nothing. I was shocked, and I thought, uh-oh, maybe it's just him. Then I started interviewing more of these guys. The guy everyone goes to on his team, the guy everyone goes to in his fraternity, and time after time after time, the least knowledgeable guy. Now, that's the unfortunate thing, is the perception is he's got all this experience, but mileage does not lead to knowing and understanding. It just kind of keeps the average thing or below average thing going. So, another thing is being alone. So often when we're alone, the first thing we do is pull out our phones. It's like yawning. One kid in a group pulls it out, everyone's like, whoa, it just catches on. And so, you've got to think about, when you're with a group of people, engage with the people. This is what I say to my kids. They hate it. I'm like, hey, kids, engage with the people. Put your phones away when we're in the car together, when we're as a family, when you're a group of friends. My son, he's like clickety-click on the couch, getting his friends over there, going to go build mountain bike trails. Senior in high school. He's like clicking away for the longest time. Finally, they all have to drive like 20 minutes because we live in rural New Hampshire. They all get to our house, and they come in, they get a bunch of bags of potato chips, and they start hoovering our potato chips. And then what happens? They're on the couch together, 5 big boys. And what do? One pulls it out, whoa, whoa, and they're there, clickety-click. They're not building mountain bike trails. Clickety, 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 click. And I'm so mean, I come over and I'm like, fellas, I could save on chips if you all went back to your own couch and you could click your afternoon away on your own couch. No need to be online. Love having you. But when you're here, engage with the people. At first they're like, oh, Cindy, what's up? Now they're like, they start saying engage with the people when someone pulls out the phone. It's like connect with the people. If you're in a group of people, clicking away and like trying to engage in that conversation and this one, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm totally listening. Totally listening. Oh, it's so funny. This, what? I mean, it's like scattered. If you need to have that conversation, trace yourself away from the group and have at it, okay? But otherwise, connect with the people you are with. And being alone, you need to practice being alone without a device. That means getting in your own head. When I was 12, I was allowed to choose whether I went to church anymore. And I said to my mom when I was 15, I'm like, Mom, all those years you made me go to church, I didn't listen to the priest. I didn't listen to a thing he said. I was just having my own time. She goes, guess what? You weren't watching TV. You weren't chatting with your friends. You weren't running around on a field, skiing down a mountain, hanging with your friends. You were in your own head for 1 hour a week. That is a beautiful thing. And I was like, she got me. Touche, lady, touche. Like, And that's the thing is we don't have a lot of time in our heads. Find the time. Resist pulling the device out and just think. And let thoughts flow through your head. Take in the beautiful sights in this beautiful town where you live. It's beautiful. You start to forget that until you have a friend from the city who comes up like, I can't believe you live here. I love the city. That's what you need, a little perspective. Have some friends over from another part of the country and they're like, this is amazing, but you forget. We all forget. We take it for granted. The perception. So here's the thing. If hooking up for high school students and college students was the most fulfilling, awesome sex, wouldn't be standing here right now. Wouldn't bother talking to anyone out there. But guess what? It's just not as awesome. Even seniors in college who've been at it, keeping like, I think if I keep going, it will get good, won't it? I think it will. I'll just keep going. But there's the thing, when you're not communicating, because it's awkward, it's not great. Like really, when you talk to people about their hookup life, some say it's terrible, horrible, didn't go well. Some say it was okay. Some say it was good. The best you can really get is, it was fine. Fine? Take your time and make it awesome. Like make it with someone you really care about. That's when it gets awesome. But this whole idea, it's not really about the sex. It's about checking the box, joining the hookup club. It's not really about connection, right? So we, once again, as I said, the practice becomes your practice. And so what motivates you? Like people won't, the thing that motivates most high school boys is not to get off, is not because he likes the girl. The most of the things that motivate him is by hooking up with that girl, and I am talking about the heterosexual dynamic right now, but that decision to hook up with that girl is mostly because if I hook up with her, my friends will be impressed. See, this is the thing. I knew this by 12. And so I was like never flattered if someone was interested in being with me in any way, shape, or form. Like, you just don't be too flattered. Make sure, that's why, take your time, connect, find out what the motives are. And the term hooking up is very conveniently vague. It could be intercourse, it could be holding hands, it could be kissing, it could be this. But it's so convenient because if you don't want to be judged by a group, you can say to one group, oh, we just hooked up. Another group, like, we totally hooked up. Same act that occurred, but the way you present it to different people keeps judgment at bay or impresses people you want to impress, because that's what's required to be connected. So think about that. So people say, like, well, why are you, like I said, different people are ready at different times to have that connection. But here's the reality. I know, people I've been talking to in high school and college, some of them are much older now, in their late 20s, and I've talked to them over the years, continue to interview them about their life. And this is the message I get from high school students from college students to tell high school students, and from adults to tell college students, like, take your time. And here's the reality. The research now is clear. I hear it in the trenches, but this basic fact is interesting, that 12 sexually active girls from age 12 to 19, 67% of them wish they started having sex later. That's 2/3, most, okay? Among boys, 12 to 19 who are sexually active, who usually are later than girls starting, but the percentage is 53% wish they started later. That's more than half. So this idea, like, yeah, this is what I'm doing, you got to put that on the surface because that's how our culture, that's what they value, and that's what you're pressured to do. But really, take your time, do it on your terms. Now, gaming. There's some great games that are good for your brain and you're figuring things out, but there's a whole lot of violent games that are sexually violent and, just violent, right? And the gaming industry's got you figured out. They know they want to get you trained when you're a toddler, so they make these little games with fish and butterflies, and they get you these little happy, jolly games. So when you're a little kid, you're playing your game, and your parents are like, this is awesome. I can take a shower. I can check my email, and I can cook dinner. My kid is not moving, and my kid's mouth is shut. Clickety, clickety, click. It's just trained, right? So my basic message is, there's a lot out there to consume that's telling you how to be and how to make your choices. I want you to leave here with a more critical eye, to really look at what the messages you're taking in, whether it's YouTube, Netflix, porn, gaming. Observe magazines, websites. Like, think about how you're consuming. And also, don't get this idea that you're a multitasker, that you can watch a football game, do your paper, have some chat sessions open, and have your phone going. Like, no one actually multitasks. We say we're multitaskers, but the brain has to actually shut off and shut on. Like, this is something that is clear in the research. Like, you don't actually do multiple things at once. That actually you should shut down all the other devices and get your paper done, or put a timer on. Then close your paper, and then open up social media and take a look at social media, like, for 20 minutes. But set a timer, because you will spend hours before you know it. So take your time, like doing each thing in chunks rather than everything at once. It doesn't work. It's not good for your brain. It's actually training you to be more scattered. So be careful about that. I also want you to think about practicing that social courage on smaller things. Call people out if they're hazing, if they're being mean, if they're being cruel. Call them out, straight up. If they're using all those words we talked about, fag, gay, bitch, pussy, all those words, call people out. Like, what do you really mean? And if someone's sending you inappropriate text, here's the thing, gals, when you get the text, don't write back with some F-bombs and something mean, because here's the thing about the text. When people send a text or a picture of their naked selves, some people, when you write back something mean, it really does make people think, I think it's going to work out. Like, really what you need to do is go to that person. Often you find the person who's sending that, they're not like super confident. It's like going, whoo. And if you get a strong friend, bring that friend and go ask some questions. Like, what was your intention? What did you think about? What were you hoping for? And just straight up ask people what their intentions are. That alone will deter it. But writing a mean text back, sometimes encourages that person. So when it comes to sex, when it comes to drugs, you follow your inner compass. Take your time, choose carefully. Think about, observe the adults you know who have healthy choices. As guys, when you're under that pressure, like to be like man enough, think about who are the men you really admire. Ask them how they got to that place of confidence and comfort. Like ask your anchoring adults. Go for it. Okay, I'm willing to take a few questions. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you.